The escape pod was barely holding together when Commander Alara Vance first saw it on her scanner. And she knew right away that whoever was inside did not have much time left. "Bring it in," she ordered. And her crew moved fast because they had done this before, pulling broken ships and dying travelers from the cold emptiness of space. The Vagrant Star was not a military vessel, and it was not fancy or powerful. But it was home to Alara and her small crew of 7, and they made their living hauling cargo between the outer colonies where the big companies refused to go when they opened the pod. They found a man inside, or at least something that looked like a man, with pale skin and dark hair and eyes that seemed too old for his young face. He was barely breathing, and his body was covered in wounds that looked like burns and cuts mixed together. And the ship's medical officer, a woman named Dr. Chung, worked for 6 hours to keep him alive for 3 days. The stranger slept, and the crew whispered about him, wondering where he came from and what had happened to him, because his pod had no markings, and his clothes were strange and unlike anything they had seen before. On the 4th day he woke up, and the first thing he did was grab Dr. Chun by the throat. Took 3 crew members to pull him off, and even then he fought like a wild animal, screaming words in a language none of them understood, his eyes wide with terror and rage. "Easy," Alara said, stepping forward with her hands raised, showing him she meant no harm. "You are safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you." The stranger stopped struggling, but his eyes darted around the room like a trapped creature looking for an escape. And when he finally spoke in their language, his voice was rough and cold. "Where am I?" he demanded, not asking but commanding, as if he had the right to give orders on a ship that was not his. "You are on the Vagrant Star," Alara told him calmly. "We found your pod drifting near the Kellian asteroid belt and brought you aboard. You nearly died." The stranger laughed, but it was not a happy sound. It was bitter and dark, and made the crew members step back from him. "You should have left me," he said. He told them his name was Kale. Nothing more, and he refused to answer any questions about where he came from or what had happened to him in the days that followed. Kale proved to be the worst guest the Vagrant Star had ever carried. He complained about the food, calling it garbage fit for animals, and he insulted the crew at every opportunity, telling Marcus, the engineer, that his repairs were sloppy, telling Dr. Chun that her medical skills were primitive, telling young Tomas, the pilot, that a child could fly better than him. He broke things too, sometimes by accident and sometimes clearly on purpose. And when anyone confronted him about it, he just shrugged and smiled that cold smile that never reached his eyes. "Why do you keep him here?" Marcus asked Alara one night when most of the crew had gathered in the common room to complain. "He is poison, Captain. Everything he touches turns bad." Alara looked at her crew, at their frustrated faces and tired eyes, and she understood their anger because Kale had given them every reason to hate him. But she had been watching Kale when he thought no one was looking, and she had seen things that made her pause. She had seen him flinch when Tomas offered him extra food. As if kindness was a weapon he did not know how to defend against, she had seen him sitting alone in the cargo bay at night, staring at the stars with an expression of such deep sadness that it made her chest hurt. She had seen the way he pushed people away before they could get close, like someone building walls out of cruelty because walls made of stone had failed him before. "He stays," Alara said simply. Marcus threw his hands up in frustration, and Dr. Chun shook her head, and even gentle Tomas looked disappointed. But Alara was the captain, and her word was final. The next morning, Kale cornered her in the hallway, his eyes narrow with suspicion. "Why?" he asked. And for once, his voice was not mocking or cruel. It was genuinely confused. "Your crew hates me. I have given you nothing but trouble. Why do you let me stay?" Alara studied him for a long moment, this strange man with the old eyes and the sharp tongue, and she saw past the anger to something underneath. Something wounded and afraid, because I have seen people like you before, she said quietly. Soldiers who came back from wars they could not forget. Children who grew up in places where love was just another word for pain. Survivors who learned that hurting others was the only way to keep from being hurt themselves. Kale's expression flickered. Just for a second, and Alara knew she had struck something true. You push people away because you expect them to leave, she continued. You make yourself impossible to love because then it does not hurt when they abandon you. I understand that, I really do. You do not know anything about me, Kale said. But his voice had lost its edge. No, Alara agreed. I do not, but I know that whatever happened to you, whatever made you this way, it must have been terrible. And I know that throwing you out would just prove everything you believe about the universe. She stepped closer. And Kale did not back away. I am not going to do that, she said. You can be difficult and mean and break every dish on this ship. And I am still not going to abandon you. That is not who I am. That is not who we are. Kale stared at her for a long time. And something shifted in his two old eyes. Something that might have been hope or might have been fear. It was hard to tell the difference. Then he turned and walked away without another word, and Alara let him go. Knowing that some battles could not be won with a single conversation, that night she found a broken cup on her desk. Carefully glued back together with clumsy hands. It was not an apology. Not exactly, but it was something, it was a start. 3 weeks passed and Kale did not get better. If anything, he got worse. And the crew of the Vagrant Star began to crack under the pressure of living with someone who seemed determined to make them miserable. It started with small things. Cool observations that cut deeper than any knife. He told Marcus that his wife had left him because he was boring. Which was true, but nobody was supposed to know about it. And when Marcus demanded to know how Kale had found out, Kale just smiled that empty smile and walked away. He told Dr. Chun that she had become a ship's doctor because she had failed at a real hospital, picking at a wound she had spent years trying to heal. And she locked herself in her quarters for 2 days afterward. He whispered to Thomas that Captain Vance only kept him around because she felt sorry for him, not because he was actually good at his job. And the young pilot's confidence shattered like glass on stone. The crew began to fight among themselves. Old tensions rising to the surface, secrets spilling out like blood from reopened wounds. And through it all Kale watched, with those ancient eyes that seemed to see everything and care about nothing. Then came the cargo incident. Vagrant Star was carrying medical supplies to a colony on the edge of settled space. 3 months' worth of pay for a single delivery. And somehow the airlock seal failed and half the cargo vented into the void. Marcus checked the systems and found that someone had tampered with the controls. And everyone knew who it had to be. That is it, Marcus shouted at the emergency meeting, his face red with rage. He has gone too far this time, Captain. We cannot keep protecting him. The crew gathered in the common room, their faces hard and angry. And even Dr. Chen, who was usually the voice of calm, looked ready to throw Kale out the nearest airlock. We vote, said Yuki, the ship's navigator who rarely spoke. Either he goes or we do. I am sorry, Captain, but I cannot live like this anymore. One by one they raised their hands, all 6 of them. And Alara stood alone against their united front. I will not do it, she said. Then we leave at the next station, Marcus said. And there was real pain in his voice because the Vagrant Star had been his home for 5 years. I am sorry, Alara, but you are choosing him over us. Alara looked at her crew, at the people who had become her family, and she felt the weight of the choice pressing down on her chest. No, she said slowly. I am choosing to be the kind of person who does not give up on people, even when it is hard, even when it costs me everything. She took a deep breath. You can leave if you need to. I will understand, but I have to believe that somewhere inside that man is someone worth saving. And if I abandon him now, then I'm just proving that the universe is exactly as cruel as he thinks it is. The room was silent for a long moment. Marcus left, packing his bags that night and catching a transport at the next station. And Yuki went with him, but the others stayed, grumbling and unhappy, but unwilling to abandon their captain, even if they thought she was making a terrible mistake. That night, Alara went looking for Kale and found him in the cargo bay, sitting among the empty crates where the medical supplies used to be. Staring out the viewport at the endless stars, she sat down beside him without saying anything, close enough to touch but not touching. And for a long time, they just breathed the same recycled air and watched the same distant lights. I did not do it, Kale said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. The cargo. I did not sabotage the airlock. I know, Alara said. He turned to look at her, surprise breaking through his usual mask of cold indifference. How could you possibly know that? Because you are cruel with your words, but you are not stupid, she said. Destroying that cargo would have stranded us out here. You too. Whatever game you were playing, you were not trying to kill yourself. Kale laughed. And this time, it was different. There was real emotion in it. Something raw and painful. You see too much, he said. It is a gift, Alara replied. Or a curse, depending on who you ask. They sat in silence again. And then Kale spoke, the words coming out like they had been locked inside him for a very long time. I have lived a long time, he said. Longer than you can imagine. And in all that time, I have learned one thing above all else. What is that? Alara asked. Everyone leaves, Kale said. And his voice cracked on the words. Everyone, always, no matter what they promise. No matter how much they claim to care. In the end, they see what I really am, and they run. Every species in every corner of this galaxy. They all do the same thing. He turned to face her fully. And for the first time, Alara saw past the anger and the cruelty to the terrified creature underneath. I have been running for 300 years, he whispered. 300 years of wearing masks and pretending to be something I am not. 300 years of waiting for the moment when someone finally sees through the disguise and turns away in horror. Alara did not gasp or pull back or ask what he meant by 300 years. She just looked at him with those steady brown eyes that seemed to hold all the warmth in the universe, then stopped running. She said simply. Kale stared at her like she had spoken in a language he did not understand. You lost 2 crew members because of me, he said. You lost 3 months of pay. Your people hate me. I have done nothing but hurt everyone on this ship since I arrived. Yes, Alara agreed. And you still will not abandon me. No, Kale's face crumpled. Just for a moment, and Alara saw something she had not seen before. Something that looked almost like hope struggling to survive in soil that had been poisoned for centuries. Why? He asked. And it was not a demand this time. It was a plea. Alara smiled softly. Because giving up on people is easy, she said. And I have never been very good at taking the easy way. She stood up and offered him her hand. And after a long moment of hesitation, Kale took it. His fingers were cold, and they trembled slightly as they wrapped around hers. And Alara held on tight. Come on, she said. The others are making dinner and you should be there, even if they are not happy about it. You are part of this crew now, whether anyone likes it or not. And for the first time since he had arrived on the vagrant star, Kale followed someone without arguing. Something changed after that night in the cargo bay, not quickly and not obviously. But change came nonetheless, like the slow turning of a great wheel. Kale still snapped at people, still said cruel things when he felt cornered, still retreated behind walls of ice when anyone got too close. But now there were cracks in those walls. Small moments of warmth that surprised everyone, including himself. He fixed the navigation console that had been glitching for months, working through the night without being asked. And when Tomas thanked him the next morning, Kale just grunted and walked away. But his ears turned red in a way that might have been embarrassment. He learned the names of the crew members who'd stayed. Really learned them, not just labels to use when he wanted to hurt them. And sometimes he would ask Dr. Chun about her day or sit quietly while Thomas told stories about growing up on a farming colony. He still broke things occasionally. A cup here, a datapad there, but now he fixed them afterward. Sometimes leaving them on their owner's pillow without explanation. Silent apologies that spoke louder than words ever could. The remaining crew watched this transformation with cautious eyes. Not quite ready to trust, but not quite able to ignore the evidence in front of them. He is different. Dr. Chun admitted to Alara one evening as they shared a meal in the captain's quarters. I do not understand it, but I cannot deny it either. Alara smiled over her cup of synthetic coffee. People can change, she said. Sometimes they just need someone to believe in them first. 2 months passed, and the Vagrant Star picked up new crew to replace those who had left. A tough engineer named Raj and a quiet security officer named Kim. And both of them looked at Kale with curiosity rather than the fear and resentment that had marked his early days on the ship. Life settled into something almost normal. Cargo runs and repairs and long nights playing cards in the common room. And if Kale still kept himself apart more than the others, at least he was present. At least he was trying. Then the hegemony came. The first sign was a shadow on the scanner. A ship so large it blocked out the stars behind it. Followed by another and another until a fleet of 7 vessels surrounded the Vagrant Star like wolves circling wounded prey. We are being hailed, Tomas said, his voice tight with fear. Captain, they are identifying themselves as the Third Fleet of the Galactic Hegemony. Alara felt ice form in her stomach because everyone knew the hegemony. The vast alien coalition that controlled half the known galaxy with an iron fist. They did not come to the outer colonies for friendly visits. On screen, she ordered the face that appeared was not human. It was something else entirely. Blue skin and too many eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth that curved upward in what might have been a smile. I am Commander Zeth of the hegemony vessel Eternal Judgment, the alien said. You are harboring a fugitive. Surrender the deceiver, and you may go free. Refuse, and you will be destroyed. I do not know what you are talking about, Alara said, keeping her voice steady even as her heart raced. We are just a cargo ship. We do not have any fugitives here. Commander Zeth's many eyes narrowed. Do not play games with me, human. Our scanners have confirmed the presence of a Valkyrie on your vessel. There is only one left in the entire galaxy, and we have been hunting him for 3 centuries. Surrender him now. The bridge went silent, and Alara felt every pair of eyes turn toward Kale, who stood frozen by the rear console with an expression of pure defeat on his face. Valkyrie, Dr. Chen whispered. I thought they were extinct. They are, Kale said, and his voice was hollow and empty. All except one. He stepped forward, and for a moment, Alara thought he was going to surrender himself. But instead, he turned to face her with those ancient eyes that suddenly made sense in a way they never had before. I am sorry, he said. I should have told you. I should have warned you what you were getting into when you pulled me from that pod. What are you? Thomas asked. Fear making his voice shake, Kale smiled sadly. I am the last of the Valkyrie. My people were shapeshifters. We could become anyone, anything. We lived among other species for millennia, learning their secrets, sometimes helping them and sometimes destroying them. He looked back at the screen where Commander Zeth waited with predatory patience. The hegemony decided we were too dangerous to exist. 50 years of war, and they killed everyone I ever knew. My parents, my siblings, my children, everyone. I have been running and hiding ever since, wearing human skin because humans are everywhere, and no one looks too closely at another human. You are a monster, Raj said. Backing away from him, a shapeshifter, Everything about you could be a lie. Yes, Kale agreed, and there was no defense in his voice. Only acceptance. I am exactly what they say I am. I have manipulated governments and started wars and done terrible things in my long life. I told myself it was for survival, but the truth is, I became exactly what they accused my people of being. He turned to Alara, and she saw something in his eyes that looked like peace. The peace of someone who had finally stopped running. Hand me over, he said. I am not worth dying for. I am not worth any of you dying for. Let them take me and fly away and forget I ever existed. Commander Zeth's voice crackled through the speakers. You have 1 minute to comply. Alara looked at her crew, at their frightened faces, at the impossible odds displayed on every screen, at the man who was not a man standing before her, asking to be sacrificed. She thought about everything Kale had told her, about the centuries of running, about the mask he wore to survive, about the small acts of kindness that had slowly begun to replace the cruelty. She thought about the broken cup glued back together with clumsy hands. Then she turned to Tomas and said 2 words. Full speed. The young pilot stared at her in shock. Captain. You heard me, Alara said, her voice hard as steel. Get us out of here. Now. Tomas's hands flew across the controls, and the vagrant star lurched forward, engines screaming as they fled into the darkness between stars behind them. The hegemony fleet opened fire, and Kale stood frozen on the bridge, watching this human woman choose war with an empire rather than give him up, not understanding why. Not understanding anything anymore except that for the first time in 300 years, someone had chosen him. The chase through the darkness lasted 4 days and 4 nights. Though in space there was no real difference between the two. Just endless black punctuated by distant stars and the flash of weapons fire. The vagrant star was fast for a cargo ship, but the hegemony vessels were built for war. And no matter how hard Tomas pushed the engines, they could not shake their pursuers. Hull breach on deck 3. Raj shouted over the alarms that screamed through the ship. I am sealing it off, but we cannot take many more hits like that. Alara gripped the arms of her captain's chair as another blast rocked the ship. Watching her screens fill with red warning lights. Watching her home fall apart around her. Keep going, she ordered. There is an asteroid field ahead. We can lose them in there. Captain, that field is classified as hazardous, Kim said from her security station. The rocks are too dense. One wrong move and we will be crushed. Then we better not make any wrong moves. Alara replied. They plunged into the asteroid field and the world became chaos. Massive rocks spinning past the viewport close enough to touch. The ship twisting and diving as Tomas flew like he had never flown before. His hands moving across the controls with desperate precision behind them too. Hegemony ships tried to follow, and one of them clipped an asteroid and exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the darkness for a brief, beautiful moment, but the others were still coming. Still firing, and the vagrant star could not run forever. We are losing engine power, Raj reported. His voice grim. 10 minutes, maybe 15. And then we are dead in the water. Kale stood at the back of the bridge where he had been standing since the chase began, silent and still, watching these humans fight and bleed and refuse to give up. He did not understand. He had lived among thousands of species, across hundreds of years. He had seen courage and cowardice and everything in between. But he had never seen anything like this. Why are you doing this? He demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. You are going to die. All of you. For what? For me? Nobody answered because nobody had time. They were too busy trying to survive the next 30 seconds. I am not worth this, Kale shouted. I am a monster. I have done terrible things. I have hurt people and destroyed lives and manipulated entire civilizations. You do not even know the half of what I am capable of. We know. Dr. Chun said, without looking up from her console, where she was trying to reroute power to the shields. Elara told us everything you told her. Then why? Kale demanded. Why throw your lives away for someone like me? An explosion rocked the ship and Elara was thrown from her chair, her head striking the edge of a console. Blood streaming down her face as she pulled herself back up. Because you being an asshole does not make you unworthy of basic decency, she said. And despite everything, there was a smile on her bloodied face. We have all been the worst versions of ourselves at some point. We have all done things we are ashamed of. We have all been the person that others wanted to give up on. She stood up straight, facing Kale with fierce determination in her eyes. Giving up on people is easy, she said. Anyone can do that. Anyone can walk away when things get hard. Anyone can decide that someone is not worth the trouble. Another blast, another shower of sparks. And Kim cried out as a piece of debris cut her arm. We do not do easy, Elara continued. That is what it means to be human. That is what separates us from everyone else in this galaxy. We are stubborn and stupid, and we refuse to abandon the people we care about even when it makes no sense. You barely know me, Kale said, and his voice was breaking. I have been on this ship for less than 4 months. 4 months is enough, Tomas said from the pilot's chair, not taking his eyes off the asteroids ahead. 4 months of watching you try to push us away. 4 months of seeing you slowly start to let us in. 4 months of you fixing the things you broke and learning our names and sitting with us at dinner, even though you did not have to. You are ours now, Raj added. Whether you like it or not, that is how it works on this ship. Once you are part of the crew, you are part of the crew. We do not abandon our own. Kale looked around the bridge at these battered humans, at their bloody faces and determined eyes, at the way they kept fighting, even though they knew they could not win something cracked inside him, something that had been frozen for 300 years. I have manipulated civilizations, he whispered. I have toppled empires. I have worn 1,000 faces and told 1,000,000 lies. I have been monster and god and everything in between. He took a step forward, then another, but no one has ever just chosen me, he said. Not once in 300 years has anyone looked at what I really am and decided I was worth fighting for. Elara reached out and took his hand, a grip strong despite the blood loss and the chaos around them. Then everyone else was wrong, she said simply. The ship shuddered as something critical failed, and the lights flickered and died, leaving only the red glow of emergency power. We have lost main engines, Raj reported, his voice quiet. This is it. Elara looked at her crew, at these brave, foolish humans who had followed her into an unwinnable fight, and she felt no regret, only pride. It has been an honor, she said, and then Kale stepped forward. And there was something different in his eyes now, something that had not been there before. A fire that burned away the cold emptiness that had defined him for so long. No, he said, I will not let it end like this. You showed me something today, all of you. You showed me what I could have been if I had met humans 300 years ago instead of the hegemony. He turned to face the viewport where the hegemony fleet was closing in for the kill. You want to see what I really am, he said. You want to know why the hegemony fears the Valkyrie so much they spent 50 years trying to wipe us out. He looked back at Elara one last time. You did not turn away when I was a bad human, he said softly. That means you are worthy to see my true form. And then he began to change. The transformation began slowly at first, like watching ice melt under a warm sun. And then it happened all at once. Kale's human form dissolved into light. Pure white light that filled the bridge and forced everyone to shield their eyes. And when they could see again, the man they had known was gone. In his place stood something beautiful and terrible. A being made of living starlight and impossible geometry. Shapes within shapes that the human mind could barely comprehend. And yet somehow it was not frightening, it was breathtaking. Kale towered over them now, his form shifting and flowing like music made visible. And when he spoke, his voice resonated through every system on the ship, through every frequency in space. "Open a channel to the hegemony fleet," he said. And his voice was like thunder wrapped in silk. "I have something to say to them." Alara's hands moved without hesitation, trusting him completely. And a moment later, Commander Zeth's blue face appeared on the screen, his many eyes going wide with shock. "Impossible," the hegemony commander whispered. "You should not be able to do this. You should not have enough power left after all these years. You hunted us because you feared what we could become," Kale said, and his light form pulsed with each word. "But you never understood what we were." He moved closer to the screen, filling the entire view with radiance. "We were mirrors," he continued. "We reflected what we encountered. Your empires showed us cruelty, so we became cruel. Your armies showed us war, so we became weapons. Your leaders showed us deception, so we became deceivers." His light shifted, cycling through colors that had no names in any human language. "For 300 years I ran and hid and wore masks, because I thought that was all I could be," he said. "I thought I was broken beyond repair. I thought the monster you made me into was all that remained." He turned to look at Alara and her crew, at these small, fragile humans who had refused to let him go. "But these humans showed me something else," he said. "They showed me stubborn kindness that makes no logical sense. They showed me loyalty that asks for nothing in return. They showed me what it looks like when someone chooses to believe in you, even when you have given them every reason not to." His form blazed brighter, and every screen on every hegemony ship flickered with his light. The Valkyrie were never just shapeshifters, Kale announced to the fleet, to the galaxy, to anyone who was listening. "We were adapters, beings who evolved to match the highest potential of those around us. And for too long I was surrounded by fear and hatred and violence." He spread what might have been arms, and his light touched the vagrant star, and everywhere it touched the damage began to heal. Metal reforming, systems coming back online, wounds closing as if they had never been. "These humans gave me something I had forgotten was possible," he said. "They gave me hope," Dr. Chun gasped as the cut on her arm sealed itself, leaving not even a scar. "In their presence, I have become something the galaxy has never seen," Kale continued. "A Valkyrie of mercy, a Valkyrie of compassion. And I have you to thank for that, Commander Zeth. If you had not chased us, if you had not pushed them to their limits, I might never have understood what they were willing to sacrifice for me." He reached out with his light, and it spread beyond the vagrant star to touch the hegemony ships themselves. "So I am going to give you a gift," Kale said. "Not because you deserve it, but because mercy is what I have become." The light intensified until it was almost blinding. And then something impossible happened. The crew of the vagrant star watched as the damage to the hegemony ships began to reverse, as debris reformed into hulls, as fires extinguished themselves, as the vessel that had been destroyed in the asteroid field reassembled itself piece by piece with its crew alive and whole inside. "You killed my people," Kale said. "You hunted me across the stars for 300 years, and I could destroy you with a thought. I could unmake your entire fleet and scatter your atoms across the void." Commander Zeth's face had gone pale, his many eyes wide with terror. "But that is not what my humans would do," Kale said. "They would choose something harder. They would choose to break the cycle. So that is what I am choosing too." He pulled his light back, condensing slowly into a form that was human-shaped once more, though still glowing faintly at the edges. "Leave," he commanded. "Go back to your masters and tell them what you have witnessed today. Tell them that the last Valkyrie is no longer their enemy. Tell them that I have found better teachers." The hegemony fleet did not hesitate, engines firing as they turned and fled into the darkness between stars. And within minutes they were gone. Silence fell over the bridge of the vagrant star. Kale's form finished settling back into his human shape. Though now there was something different about him. A warmth in his eyes that had not been there before. A softness in the lines of his face. "Well," Tomas said finally, his voice shaking. "That was something." Alara started to laugh. The kind of laughter that comes from surviving the impossible. And one by one the others joined in until the whole bridge was filled with the sound of relief and joy and disbelief. Kale stood apart from them, uncertain, still not quite believing that this was real. And then Alara walked over and punched him in the arm. "That is for not telling us you could do that sooner," she said. And then she pulled him into a hug. "And this is for staying." The others crowded around. Pichan and Tomas and Raj and Kim, reaching out to touch him as if to make sure he was real. And for the first time in 300 years, Kale allowed himself to be held later. When the ship was quiet and the stars hung peaceful in the viewport, Alara found Kale in his usual spot in the cargo bay, sat down beside him, and for a long time neither of them spoke. "What happens now?" Kale asked finally. "I cannot pretend to be human anymore. Everyone will know what I am." "Good," Alara said. "You should never have had to pretend in the first place. The galaxy will fear me." "The galaxy fears a lot of things," Alara replied. "But fear fades, especially when people see the truth. And the truth is that you are one of us now. A member of the vagrant star, weird alien powers and all." Kale smiled. And it was the first real smile she had ever seen from him. One that reached his two old eyes and made them look almost young. "I was wrong before," he said. "When I said everyone leaves." "Yes, you were." "I think I would like to stop running now," he said. "I think I would like to go home." Alara stood and offered him her hand, just as she had done that night months ago in this same cargo bay. "Welcome home, then," she said, and Kale took her hand and followed her back to the bridge where the others were waiting. And somewhere in the galaxy, the hegemony trembled, not because humanity had a weapon, but because humanity had proven something far more dangerous. They had shown that even monsters could learn to be better all. It took with someone stubborn enough not to give up on them.